This is the gravest threat any autocratic government has ever experienced. And it's brought to you by AI. But first, a quick venture down memory lane. It wasn't too long ago when we actually came across a rather large stockpile of ancient scrolls that were surprisingly being used as fuel, and they were burned quite heavily before they were discovered. Now, these scrolls, they contained a lot of information, but we couldn't unroll them. So, through very, very painful analysis and using special X-ray and other type of sensors, we were able to eventually pull out the writing on these scrolls. But they were in cuneiform, and the difficulty with reading cuneiform is even though the cuneiform strokes are the same, depending on what era you're in, whether it was the very ancient Babylon or whether it eventually became the Syrians, the meanings changed. And this is an important concept, and I'll explain why when it comes to AI, because this change in meanings made it difficult because you'd actually have to find an expert who would be able to understand not only the cuneiform, but then understand the time period that the cuneiform was in. And that made it difficult because we don't have very many experts of cuneiform lying about. And that was true up until very recently, where someone took the cuneiform, all the knowledge we had on it, and threw it into a large language model. And from there, training the large language model on cuneiform was then able to apply it to these burned scrolls and was able to arrive at a very semi accurate translation of the scrolls. Now, why this is important and why it's such a grave threat to autocratic governments everywhere is that these governments rely upon the strict control of information. And they can, like, for example, the People's Republic of China, control what happens within their own borders in their own network. But if you were to escape the Great Firewall of China, which is quite easy to do, and traverse to other parts of the globe, you discover that the information runs counter to the information that the PRC may feed you. And so then the question you have to ask is how can they access that information? Because most of it is in a different language. And so they have to become fluent in English in some manner in order to translate it. And it becomes very difficult. But this is where AI comes in clutch. You see, the same techniques of training an LLM on an ancient language is the same techniques that you use to train an LLM on any language. And what's more is that it's not only able to translate what's said, but it's able to understand context and it's able to change the meaning of the information coming in. So if the information's written in a sarcastic way, it will be culturally aware of that and translate the material in a sarcastic way for the reader to understand. And it can be done in near semi real time. So if someone were to jump the Great Firewall of China, go to, say, Twitter, and fire up one of these LLMs, they could conceivably translate the fire hose that Twitter offers in real time in a context and culturally aware method. And that's absolutely huge, not only as a threat against governments, but also as a way of disseminating information worldwide. It used to be back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, even up to the 70s and 80s, that in order for you to get a PhD, you would actually have to become fluent in another language and then write your dissertation in another language and not in your primary. Because the idea being is if you can understand what other experts in other languages of the world are doing, you are that much better informed. And we've lost that with our modern PhD programs. But with AI, we can get that back because so much research is published in English that could then be translated in context with the cultural understanding into Swahili or any of these other languages that are out there. And it would extremely open up the door to just mass knowledge that anyone at any time can really benefit from. And in some ways, if this was taken to its logical extension, you might end up with an idea that was once popular in Star Trek, which is the universal language translator, and that every time someone speaks, you would hear it and understand it in your own language and speak back. Well, this is going to be a little bit different than that sci-fi version of the universal language translator in that everyone will speak in their own native tongue, but we will understand them in ours as the AI either feeds it to us via, maybe a bone conduction headset or otherwise. We'd be able to understand them. And that's really where humanity will take off because they'll no longer be shackled by the information restrictors that censorship comes from governments. They no longer be restricted by language barriers. And you really have to wonder how far humanity will be able to advance when we're able to communicate extremely well with people who don't even understand us if we didn't have the AI translating in real time with tone and culture and choice of words being able to translate in real time over. And in fact, we see this playing beneficially out for authors. Authors, despite them often complaining that their works are being copied verbatim by AI, actually can benefit from AI in that it allows them to have an accurate, culturally appropriate translation of their work into as many different languages as they want and sent out with the full knowledge that their work is not getting hijacked by a translator with an ideological axe to grind. So that's the huge advantages that AI can bring to the table. And it makes me really excited to see what other advancements are going on in the world of AI. And with that, I will see you in the next week.